I don't know. Let's just get back. Get back.
Between the time when Voyager went off the air and Enterprise first premiered, September 11th happened.
Anthony, you okay?
The scale, the magnitude, the emotional proximity of those attacks changed the tenor of political culture in the United States. It rerouted the course of the Star Trek franchise as well. Instead of exploring the moral ambiguities of terrorism and leading the audience towards sympathy with a terrorist cause, Star Trek would aim more towards processing the events and effects of terrorism on its victims. In part 2 of our series, we will illustrate the effect that 9/11 had on Star Trek's conversation regarding terrorism. We begin this crucial phase with Enterprise. The series Enterprise takes us back before the original series and explores the events that led to the founding of the Federation. But it is in the Xindi attack on Earth in Season 3, a stand-in for the September 11th attacks, that Enterprise truly gets to the heart of Phase 3 of Trek's terrorism discussion. These attackers, the Xindi, are not a singular alien race, but a collective of 6 races that share a single planet. The Guardians, beings the Xindi worshipped almost like gods, who are actually an alien race from the future, led the Xindi to believe that humans would eventually attack their planet and wipe them out. So, the Xindi, instead, preemptively and without warning, viciously attack Earth. The attack kills 7 million people in the Western Hemisphere, including the sister of Commander Trip Tucker.
Older or younger? Baby sister.
Response to the Xindi attack on Enterprise mirrors how a majority in the United States felt about 9/11. The emotional shock, the deepening resolve, the impetus to take the gloves off, so to speak.
I can't wait to get in there, Captain. Find the people who did this. And tell me we won't be tiptoeing around. None of that non-interference crap DePaul's always shoving down our throats. Maybe it's a good thing she's leaving. We'll do what we have to, Trip. Whatever it takes.
The new department will analyze threats. We'll guard our borders and airports. Protect our critical infrastructure. And coordinate the response of our nation to future emergencies. Department of Homeland Security will focus the full resources of the American government on the safety of the American people.
In the real world, the panicked response to 9/11 included increased militarization of the United States. Extra layers of security appeared across the nation, in airports, in new federal departments, in laws that gave policing agencies more power and authority.
He ordered it just after 9/11, and it became one of the most controversial tactics used by former President George W. Bush and his security team to fight the war on terror. The secret wiretapping, without warrants, of communications between U.S. residents and people overseas suspected of being terrorists.
On Enterprise, we see a little bit of this in the appearance of the M.A.C.O.S, Military Assault Command Operations personnel. Captain Archer welcomes the M.A.C.O.S aboard without considering the implications of a military presence on a ship of exploration. In fact, Archer sees them as necessary.
I was surprised you asked for them. You think you'll be comfortable with the military on board?
I don't have a problem with non-Starfleet personnel. The General tells me these are the best he has. I'm gonna need all the muscle I can get when we cross into the Expanse.
Like citizens of the real-life United States, Archer is shaken by the Xindi attack and feels justified in adding a military component to Starfleet.
Military Assault Command.
Captain Archer, one of the best. The quicker you folks find these Xindi, the
quicker we can get to work.
After the Xindi War, he even recommends the measure to a fellow starship captain.
Any suggestions for tactical?
You may want to find someone with more field experience. A M.A.C.O.
I'm not sure how I'd feel about a military officer on the bridge.
If I were you, I'd talk to General Casey about assigning an entire squad.
Throughout the war with the Xindi, Archer becomes rather single-minded with regards to the conflict. Defend Earth at all costs. His desperation to figure out the enemy's next move pushes him to cross lines we rarely see Starfleet captains cross.
I need what was stolen from me. There's too much at stake to let my morality get in the way.
To save humanity from the Xindi threat, Archer even permits torture. Roughly, this is an analog to the very public conflict over what to do,
Take him back to the brig.
how to feel in response to 9/11,
Let's go.
and the subsequent US-led wars in Afghanistan and Iraq.
On his second full day in office, President Obama ordered Guantanamo closed and renounced harsh interrogation tactics, a decision he defended last night.
Waterboarding violates our ideals and our values. I do believe that it is torture.
Much of the rest of Enterprise's Season 3 and beyond is clearly a continued discussion and dramatization of a post-9/11 United States. As the plot uncovers the complexity of Xindi motivations, we gain some sympathy for Xindi perspectives and characters. The Xindi were acting out of self-defense, as they see it. Their attack was a response to actions that Earth would take 400 years in the future, actions of which Starfleet characters were unaware.
I thought we were here to try and stop a war, not start one.
They struck first.
Because they were told we're going to attack them. They think they're acting in self-defense. By destroying this complex, we'll be confirming their worst fears about humanity.
Let's not forget the 7 million people who were killed.
While this certainly paints the Xindi in a slightly more sympathetic light, it is still an attempt to discuss how the 9/11 attacks were in some ways a response to decades of U.S. foreign policy that was largely unknown to the U.S. public at the time of the 9/11 attacks.
Well, now, blowback doesn't just mean retaliation. It means retaliation for things that we did abroad for which that were kept entirely secret from the American public.
Well, the problem for the United States is the animosity in the Muslim world, whether it's Al-Qaeda or any of the other groups affiliated or not affiliated with it, is the impact of U.S. foreign policy. Until that policy changes, the threat to the United States is going to continue to grow.
And when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait in 1990, threatening Saudi Arabia, bin Laden offered up his forces to fight the Iraqis. The Saudi regime declined bin Laden's offer, and fatefully, they turned instead to the United States.
U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia for the first Gulf War, and the fact that he was turned down when he had the opportunity to have Muslims protect Saudi Arabia, that would just drove him to turn against the United States in particular.
Other parallels are obvious. In one light, the Xindi resemble how Americans saw Afghanistan, not so much as a singular nation, but as a collection of squabbling groups or tribes, each with their own power structures and leadership.
In Pashtun communities like in Kandahar, tribal leaders hold sway. Talib Agha is a man you would want on your side. His loyalties, however, don't lie with the Afghan government or the Taliban.
We will accomplish nothing if all you do is run tests.
We must be patient. We must follow the plan that we all agreed to.
In another Enterprise episode, Chosen Realm, Captain Archer and his crew encounter a group of religious extremists who try to take over the ship.
We're not here to study the spheres. We're here to venerate them. We believe that it is through prayer and meditation that the makers become manifest.
Their weapon? Organic explosives embedded in their bodies. Suicide bombers. In another series of episodes early in Season 4, the Enterprise aids the Syrianites, a Vulcan splinter group considered by the Vulcan High Command to be a terrorist organization. While we move to a place of sympathy with the Syrianites as the focus and the government as the villain, The language of 9/11 is never far away. The Syrianite storyline discusses how a government can exploit the situation of terrorism to sanction its own immoral actions.
There are members of the council who are not convinced an invasion is necessary at this time.
We know they have the Zindi technology. You've all seen the data.
Data can be falsified.
We have reason to believe the Imperial Guard plans to equip their vessels with similar weaponry.
Do you have evidence of this?
They didn't steal the prototype because they were merely curious. I'm certain of one thing. Sooner or later, the Andorians will make use of this technology. Is it logical for us to wait for that day?
Colin Powell, the US Secretary of State, talked of Iraqi biological weapons labs in his briefing to the UN Security Council just before the invasion. It later emerged that his source had made the whole thing up.
It may have been, how to put it, marketed rather hard for the political purpose. That I can see.
In fact, the report was a rather disappointing confirmation of what was already suspected and perceived over the last 7 years in the time that it took to compile the report, that the war was discretionary, it was a war of choice, most likely illegal.
Later in Season 4, the Enterprise crew is forced to deal with Terra Prime, an Earth-based terrorist organization opposed to Earth becoming involved in a union of alien planets, in this case, the Federation.
I have no intention of using this weapon again, provided that every single non-human in our system leaves immediately. A new era is at hand, an era that will expose the concept of interspecies unity as an absolute and vicious lie. An era that will witness the advent of a human-centered consciousness that will place our world before all others.
Later on in Star Trek Discovery, we get a glimpse of a similar impulse. The Logic Extremists. These are Vulcan terrorists opposed to Vulcan's membership in the Federation.
This mission does not reflect true Vulcan ideology.
You are one of them, a fanatic.
Your fascination with humans can no longer be tolerated. Your obsession has blinded you to the truth. Humans are inferior.
These two organizations are, unlike the Syrianites, not painted in a sympathetic light, and they are a clear nod to post-9/11 xenophobia. Fear of the other is a constant theme in American homegrown terrorism, and an element in the cultural response to 9/11. There is one episode of Enterprise that deals with terrorists in a way reminiscent of Trek's pre-9/11 days that goes against the narrative grain of our Phase 3, Desert Crossing, from before the Zindi War arc.
We have hundreds of camps, just like this one, all across the desert, and we are going to keep attacking the Tarothans until our voices are heard. They call us terrorists, but the truth is they have been terrorizing us for centuries.
Captain Archer and Commander Tucker fall in with a terrorist group led by Zobral, and end up living some of the day-to-day experience of persecution from which Zobral claims his people are suffering. Archer rightly tells Zobral he can't help him.
Zobral, even if I were the warrior you thought I was, that's not why we're out here.
But not long after, Archer expresses some sympathy for his cause.
Decisions to get involved in the conflicts of other worlds should be left to governments, not starship captains.
I know. The irony is, I have the feeling his cause is worth fighting for.
The episode does not judge Zobral to be a terrorist or a freedom fighter, and shows that Archer can see past the arbitrary black and white nature of the post-9/11 terrorist mood in the US. It feels quite a contrary position to take, given the times in which the episode aired. But this is largely an outlier for the Enterprise series. For the rest of the franchise, terrorism and terrorists in the Trek multiverse would be largely dealt with in the vernacular dictated by the September 11th attacks, twinning real-world impressions and public conversations. That includes recent films, too.
You have any idea what a pain in the ass you are?
I think so, sir.
So tell me what you did wrong. What's the lesson to be learned here?
Though released 12 years after September 11th, Star Trek Into Darkness is very much wrapped up in a prickly bush of post-9/11 anxieties. The film focuses on how Federation foreign policy inadvertently creates a terrorist outright in Khan Noonien Singh, referred to as blowback in the real world. Into Darkness not only contains actual terrorist attacks, but also the skirting of legal due process and the ordering of an enemy's extrajudicial killing.
You park on the edge of the neutral zone, you lock on to Harrison's position, you fire, you kill him, and you haul ass.
Kirk, our hero, is at first angry enough to go along with this.
You are a criminal. I watched you murder innocent men and women. I was authorized to end you.
But then comes to his senses.
Per Starfleet regulation, I'm planning on returning Khan to Earth to stand trial.
Well, shit. You talk to him.
Kirk starts out much as Commander Tucker did after the Xindi attack, seething with anger. Other similarities abound in Star Trek Into Darkness. Terrorists hide out in the territory of a hostile enemy, Khan on the Klingon homeworld, much like Al-Qaeda basing themselves in Afghanistan. Starfleet is militarized, and the terrorist attacks are used as a pretext for war against a planet that had nothing to do with the attacks. Enterprise may have banged on these themes with more subtle sticks, but Into Darkness takes the franchise furthest in terms of a reflection of 9/11, for better or for worse. Yet even Star Trek Beyond does not go totally beyond a discussion of a post-9/11 United States. Krall, given name Balthazar Edison, and the bad guy of Star Trek Beyond, is also part of the post-9/11 conversation. Edison had been a M.A.C.O., one of the elite group of soldiers introduced in Enterprise who was tasked with defending Earth during the Xindi War and the subsequent Romulan War. Edison felt betrayed by Earth after those wars, as he watched the Federation extend an olive branch to alien species he had considered his enemies, as relations among planets changed and left him behind.
I will do whatever it takes for me and my crew. The Federation do not care about us.
Edison's backstory touches on the real-world questions of how to minimize the militarization of society, how to reintegrate not just veterans of the War on Terror, but also those with a 9/11-derived mindset that the outside world is violent and bent on destroying the U.S. way of life. Edison is given a sympathetic backstory that relates very much to the times we live in.
I fought for humanity! Lost millions to the Xindi and Romulan wars! And for what? For the Federation to sit me in a captain's chair and break bread with the enemy.
Finally, we get another window through which to process a post-9/11 context in the short track Children of Mars and in the opening season of Star Trek Picard. Specifically in this short track, we relive those tense, chaotic moments of 9/11 through a proxy, an attack on one of Earth's oldest colonies, Mars, by a contingent of rogue synthetic life forms. We experience this attack through the eyes of Kima and Lil, two children united in tragedy. For anyone in the US who was a child during the September 11th attacks, this short will undoubtedly stir up some difficult memories. Children of Mars sets up the background for Picard, the series, showing us a Federation still reeling, still withdrawing from its future out of fear. We cannot say for sure, but it is very likely that the ripple effects of 9/11 will still be a part of the world building for this new series. To sum up, terrorism is a subject filled with nuance, complexity, and hard questions. The first phase of this conversation did not deal too directly with questions of terrorism, while the second phase forced Starfleet characters to make personal decisions about terrorists/freedom fighters, and then even elevated a former terrorist to main character status in Deep Space Nine. This elevation can be seen as a moral line of increasing sympathy. The overall impulse within the Star Trek franchise is to dive in and illustrate the contours of the gray area regarding terrorism. But September 11th represents a clear dividing line in the franchise, one that placed terrorism front and center in the public consciousness in a new way. And so, in our Phase 3, the nuance that was used in sympathetically approaching terrorist characters was exchanged for an examination of the effects and consequences of terrorism, in culture, in government, in the people, and in the mindsets created by the response to terror. The immediate, heated feelings of 9/11 were not that different from the response to John Brown over 150 years previous to those attacks, regarding Brown's disputed action on Harper's Ferry. Who was the villain? Who was the hero? Where was the moral high ground? Where do you draw the line between a terrorist and a freedom fighter? These are questions that can be applied to many who have used violence to advance a cause. They are the questions that the Star Trek franchise has spent the most time exploring. Star Trek seems to be saying that there are multiple ways to approach these questions. And in Star Trek, there may not be any resolutions. And that may be because in real life, there are no resolutions. Terrorism is too complex to have a simple answer. It is a mode that has haunted humanity for thousands of years and will continue to do so. Hi, welcome to the end of everything, or at least the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. It means a great deal that you would find something this academic as interesting as we find it. Cool. But if this is the kind of thing you like, these deep dives on the forms and meanings of science fiction, this examination of, well, the greatest franchise of all time, then consider supporting Trekspertise. How can you do that? Simple. Check out our Patreon page. Link is in the subspace below. How much do you give? Well, that's up to you. The average monthly donation seems to be between $1 and $3 per month. But every little bit helps to create deeper topics, to create better animations, better music, to consult with outside expertise. Your support means bigger, better video essays. We'd like to extend a special thank you for this two-part video series in particular to Leslie E. Owen, Troy Bernier, Brandon Fibbs, Jay Manning, and Katie Boyer. And thank you to Jay Manning for writing the essay on which these videos are based. And also, thank you to Eric Watts of Treklanta. Additionally, we'd like to extend a special thank you to our Patreon supporters, Hank S. Thanks, Hank. Sam M. G. Haukur Guðmundsson. I know I'm mispronouncing your name, buddy. I'm so sorry. Philippa Woods, Alex Absher, Troy Bernier, Alex Blocker, and Cullen McArthur Jackson. Thank you. And thank you to all of our patrons. If you'd like to be notified when the next essay lands, then subscribe, turn on notifications, and especially sign up for our no-nonsense email list. The email list is the most efficient method. Again, you can find all of the relevant links in the subspace below. Thank you, and see you soon.
遠い将来を考えてみようよ。